Thank you for downloading this podcast from theoutdoorstation.co.uk. Number 358.
Hello and welcome back to The Outdoor Station and the final podcast in this current 5-part series, looking at the past, present and future of ultralight gear. If you've been listening to the series, you'll know that I've been speaking with 3 major contributors to the ultralight scene: Ron Moak of Six Moon Designs, Henry Shires of Tarp Tents and Glen van Peski of Gossamer Gear. 3 cottage manufacturers still standing after 10 or more years servicing this niche arena. This has been an incredibly popular series around the world for numerous reasons. Does the lightweight movement have a future? And if so, does the path lie along mainstream manufacturing routes or with the niche cottage enterprises? At the end of this podcast, I try to present some kind of conclusion from these discussions. However, your contributions are a valued aspect, so please visit the Outdoor Station and leave your comments there. So here Glen and I continue where we left off last time, as I seek to visualise what kind of production numbers are involved to drive a personal hobby into a cottage business. Started Gossamer Gear in 1998, and I understand it. You had your wife and somebody else nearby doing some of the sewing for you. I mean, just explain what it was like in those early years in the company. I know you've not necessarily got the same involvement now, but you were obviously still working full time as an engineer, as well as trying to establish this brand or this range of products.
Yeah, and initially with it was GVP gear back then, because I never intended it to go anywhere, so I didn't put much thought into the name. But I guess it was never really my intent to build a company. I made my own pack and then put the plans on the internet so that other people could make theirs, but other people didn't have the sewing skills. And so people kept asking me, and I guess I just did it. It was never thought to make a business out of it or anything like that. It was just trying to help other people enjoy what I'd been able to enjoy. And, frankly, just kind of got out of hand. It got to where it was taking way too much time. And since it was never my intent to make any money with it, I hadn't built any structure in to do that. It was good in one respect because I could ignore, this sounds bad, but I could ignore customer input. One thing that you find when you start a business is, you generally make what you think is a good idea and what you want, and then pretty soon you have customers that go, "Oh, this would be perfect if you just added this, or you just did this," and they all have their own ideas, and they want you to make their ideas. So, since I never intended to make any money, it was very easy for me to go, "Well, no, really, I don't care. I make what I want, and if that's what you want, that's great. Otherwise, make something yourself." Now, obviously, it's a little different situation. There's full-time staff, and so we do pay attention to customer input. And that does get reflected in the designs.
The UK's perspective, I suppose, when we first started being aware of the cottage industries in this particular niche market and sort of the ultralight lightweight interest as it started to grow in, I suppose, the early 2000s really, and started to hit the international stage, it was always there's a bit of misconception, I think, possibly from a UK perspective when they look at people in the cottage industry, as we say, for a title in somebody like yourself when you first started. I mean, how many items goes to make up a little cottage business? Is it like 1,000 items a year, or is it 100 items a year, or what are the numbers involved when you have a cottage industry or cottage business that's starting to develop and, as you say, take over?
I'm trying to remember. I still have recently I took orders on a piece of a pad of yellow lined paper, and wrote down people's name, their address, kind of what color pack they wanted, and whether they'd sent their $70 check in for their G4 pack. And so, the quantities varied, and then the production, of course, was spotty. We'd get some in, but it was very minimal quantities. I mean, we might have been shipping, 20 or 30 a month, and packed. So, we started with just one pack and then went to 4 different colors, but it was all one size, and then went to one color, but 2 sizes, and then eventually added the 3rd size. So it was pretty modest in terms of cash flow, and as I said, I mean, I never took any money out of it. Everything was just put back in. So,
but logistically, it must have been really hard to when it started to grow a bit of a matrix like that, and certainly the way that American packs have led the way as regarding having 3 different back sizes and then a different harness for male and female and different colours. All of a sudden, your matrix from doing it on a small industry basis must have been very, very complicated to keep under control.
Yeah, and it was hard to manage inventory, and of course, just Murphy's Law, the way it works out, when everyone wants smalls, you only have mediums and larges. When you have lots of mediums, everyone for some reason needs a large or a small. It just seems to work out that, and that takes time too, is the customer service, explaining to people that they have their pack inside out and that's why it doesn't fit, or why you don't make them in pink, or how come you don't have an extra small size. I mean, that all takes time, that sometimes it's hard to anticipate going in.
And so looking back at those early days now, I suppose you must do it with a bit of a wry smile, really, and looking at the Gossamer Gear company in its structure that it is at the moment. What does the actual structure of the company consist of? What, physically, with people and space and that type of thing?
Well, today we are in actually a house in Austin. It was cheaper to rent a house than commercial space, and the zoning in Austin allows you to run a business out of a house. Originally there was a spare bedroom in the house for visiting friends to use. Now we're having to look at moving. It is jam-packed. Grant Seibel, the president, is full-time. We have Michael, who is production manager. Gage is working customer support and shipping. And then we have, and then our son Grant is working on social media and things like that. So, it's a pretty significant workforce, and we're bursting at the seams where we are. It's probably in the next year we're going to have to move to something bigger.
With over 1 million listeners worldwide, The Outdoor Station is the leading online audio resource for those into the great outdoors.
I mean, your business model is a direct selling model, isn't it? You're not going through retailers. You're still working hard at dealing directly with the end user.
Yeah, and that's we like that currently for a number of reasons. One is with our product being made in the U.S., we don't have the margins for distributors and retailers. It's hard to get a decent margin just selling direct due to the production costs of having them made domestically. The other is that where our products over the years have gotten, I don't know if they're more mainstream, but more heavier duty and things like that. So there's less, I think, of a learning curve on many of our products. I'm not sure I'd be comfortable in having them well, I'm sure I wouldn't actually, in a retailer like REI or something like that, because you have people that don't understand, I think, the potential benefits, and additional requirements of lightweight gear. And so they're not going to represent it well. So I kind of like, one thing about selling direct is that people have to find us. And obviously it's not as hard as it was 10 years ago, but typically someone looking at our packs already knows something. They've already realized some value in lightening up and are working on that. And so they've, in essence, kind of self-educate themselves to a certain point before they even find us. And I think that works for us, and I think it works for them.
Yeah, and also it's a more of an enthusiastic personal relationship, isn't it? You don't have the same relationship necessarily with, as you say, a bricks and mortar retailer on a Saturday afternoon that has some staff in that may not necessarily be that interested in the products they're selling. They're more considering their activities for that particular evening. As you say, somebody's already made a key purchasing decision and they've researched, which is the one thing about the internet, which is very, very good. And providing they've had a balanced research, they can look at the videos and they can see other people's comments and they can make a lot of a judgment about a particular product before they actually contact you. They've already made their decision, really. They're probably just wanting the last questions answered about that particular product before they make the direct purchase. But then, of course, you have the follow-up as well. You have them telling you how their trip to South Africa or wherever it might have been went and how the product performed.
Yeah, you get that valuable feedback back and forth. If a customer talks to someone in a big retailer, they're talking to someone who, maybe doesn't even get out that much, but maybe their thing is rock climbing and it's outdoor, but it's not going to help them answer questions about backpacking. And they probably haven't used, even if they are backpackers that do a lot of backpacking, they're using whatever gear they have. They might not have used the specific gear that the person asking questions about. Whereas if you call Gossamer Gear and you talk to someone, you're talking to people that do backpacking with our gear. And if you have a question like, well, hey, why is this pocket small and this pocket big? They can tell you why. There are reasons for everything. So, it's much more direct communication in terms of getting your questions answered and finding the background on how to use it from people who are using them and actually design them. And then we benefit from getting direct user comment on, hey, I had this issue or that issue, or this worked really well, or hey, how about have you thought of this? We have a lot of products that are actually designed by customers. So that's been an exciting thing.
Is that a service as a one-off that you offer people, or is that just purely products?
No. We do not want to suggest that you call us with your latest, greatest idea. No,
really. But it's a great idea for a shopping bag. Really.
Exactly. Yeah. No. We're not. Have at it and make that yourself. No, these are customers that are tinkers in their own right and oftentimes make their own gear. And so as they use our gear, and many of them log thousands of miles on it, they'll come up with great ideas. And so oftentimes our products reflect little tweaks and good ideas of many different customers.
Coming back to something you said earlier on about sourcing materials and obviously manufacturing, is everything US-based?
Currently, everything's U.S.-based. We're having to reevaluate that just based on quality and production levels and issues. Production's something that I swear every year we think we have it solved, and every year or every other year we're for one reason or another looking at other options. So. Currently everything's U.S.-based, but we are looking at other options.
Are you having the same problems that I'm having, in that sometimes actually it's not necessarily cost, it's consistency of output?
Yeah, cost is a factor, but it's not the prime factor. It's quality, and then actually sometimes it's production quantity. In some cases, we're a victim of our own success, and our sewers just can't keep up. So that's been an issue for us too.
Podcasting around the world. It's all about getting out and having much more fun.
This is the Outdoor Station.
That seems very similar to obviously what Ron and Henry were saying as well, which is quite interesting. Talking of Ron and Henry, obviously we keep hearing about this mysterious but very sociable trip that you, Ron, Henry, and Brian take every year, or try to take every year when you can. And I'd like you to paint a picture really of you four guys getting together and the bragging rights that take place over bits of equipment, and paint a scenario for us. If you would, of when you set up camp together.
It is a good time. I like Henry and Ron and Brian a lot, and we all kind of built companies at about the same time. Obviously, have taken slightly different routes along the way, but there is a lot of overlap, and oftentimes, we'll actually, on these hikes, sometimes we see, like the last one I was on, we saw a prototype that Henry was working on that wasn't available yet. And I know Ron is always, there's a fair amount of, I think the trash talking is fairly equally distributed, but I know when we hiked around Sisters, in Oregon, we met one thru hiker who was blogging, and she was impressed and amazed that three people. Brian Frankel wasn't with us when she met us, but the three people she considered competitors were actually making time to hike together. She thought that was great. And then later in the trip, there was one day when we met someone who was, I think, had Ron's pack and his shelter and something else, and he was, of course, excited to meet the great Ron Moak, and was just waxing poetically about how great his gear was for him. And Ron had been pretty tired up at that point, but I think he floated down the next. He was just like, "Yeah, see you guys." It's like, we haven't met anyone carrying gossamer gear. He was pretty excited. So there's a fair amount of good-natured exchange. I go pretty minimal on the tarp, and on that trip, they kept kidding me about it was going to rain and I was going to get wet, and I better not try and crawl in with Ron or Henry. And then there's some flights of fancy talking about new products that'll never see market, and some sharing of just the generally shared travails of building a business and dealing with customers and things like that. So it's always a good time.
Sounds fantastic. I can just imagine you starting to line up all these through hikers now. Where can I go, and who's bought the most equipment from me to get some one-upmanship against your fellow hikers there?
Yeah.
Excellent. So what do you reckon the sort of the future holds in the development of these sort of products and this interest that we're talking about? Do you think it's going to be more? Henry was talking about a particular material that his Nirvana, but it wouldn't actually exist because he wanted it cheap. But do you think it's really going to be more of a design element starts to come in, but actually design with restraint?
I know that's something we're looking at, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that, where you see a little more finished or polished designs, but with maintaining functionality, I guess, and kind of a bare bones functionality without the unnecessary stuff. That's one thing about sewing gear yourself, is you start to realize how the weight adds up, and that adding a daisy chain really does add significant weight. All the little bits tend to add up. So I would not be surprised if we see more of kind of design elements, but without losing the functionality first kind of criteria.
Something else that you mentioned earlier on, actually, and somebody else has mentioned in a previous conversation, and I just wonder what your thoughts would be on it. I mean, you guys on a regular basis talk about through hikers, and that the purpose of the through hiker or their ethos is basically to get from A to B as fast as possible, or go as long a distance as possible. And the last couple of times I've heard somebody say this, I've often wondered whether if you think people are actually missing out on some of the pleasures of the subtle changing landscape, appreciating the fact, obviously, in the US, you have to go a long way to see a big change. But it all seems to be a bit of a shame that people are actually more keen on speed and not necessarily reflecting on their environment as much.
Well, I think that's a common charge leveled against people that hike long distances. And when I go on trips, I like to walk. And so generally my schedule, it depends on obviously who I'm with and the kind of trip, but I'm often up with the sun or before the sun and hiking after the sun sets. And I may not be hiking very fast, but I enjoy walking. And, people say, and I've heard them say to others that put in long miles that, you're not enjoying the outdoors, you're missing the point. And one, I think I like to say, hike your own hike. Everyone should enjoy the outdoors in the manner that they like to enjoy the outdoors. And the other thing is that, when you're hiking along with a 10-pound pack, you can enjoy it and walk at the same time. You don't have to be stopped for an hour by a lake to enjoy it if you're traveling so lightly that as you're walking along, you can enjoy everything around you. So, I think it's personal choices. And I think many thru hikers, obviously they're doing long distances for long periods of time, but I would hesitate to say that they, miss everything along the way. I think they're living it and soaking it and enjoying it and fully participating in the wilderness, even though they happen to be walking all day.
Okay, well, I think we're sort of starting to get towards the end now, so I've got a couple of additional questions for you. The first one I'm sure would fascinate many people, but what actually is in your pack, which you've paid for? That's not your own brand, obviously.
Oh, so what's in my current kit that I bought from someone else?
That you spent your hard-earned dollars on, yeah.
Hard-earned dollars. Well, one of my most recent things was a super light rain jacket, as I mentioned, from Z-Packs, breathable Cuban fiber. And I'm very happy with that. I haven't had much of a chance to test it yet, living in Southern California. But I was out in some heavy mist, and it performed well there. I like the breathability, awesome weight, good finish. I also buy Cuban fiber stuff sacks from Joe over at Z-Packs because he sells them so darn cheap that it's not worth me making them myself, even though I have all the scraps and stuff just lying around. As far as other gear, I really like the Ultra running shoes. Those are I've been kind of looking for a good shoe for backpacking for about the last 3 or 4 years, and I think in those I've found them. Sleeping bag is custom made. Shelter and pack are obviously mine. It's, much of it's odds and ends. I do use the Trail Designs cook kit with a Heineken beer can, and so that's something I didn't pay for, but I didn't make either. So
is that the Caldera cone?
Yes, it's just a tremendously efficient. I use it with Esbit. It's just a super efficient and compact little package for cooking.
Excellent. Okay. And a final question has to be, as always, the biggest lowball I can think of, which is, of all the things I could have asked you, what should I have asked you?
Well, gosh, that's a good one. I don't know. I'm always happy talking about ultralight gear, and so I'm happy to answer anything. I really don't have I think we've covered a lot of the topics that are, kind of on my mind in terms of education, getting people out more, and helping them enjoy the outdoors. So can't really think of anything else.
Well, that's got to be a good interview, a sign of a good interview then if we've touched on everything. So I just want to say, Glenn, it's been a pleasure to talk to you again. It's been a few years since we have spoken, but I must admit it's been a joy to hear your voice again and hear that everything is looking well and positive in the lightweight area. Without trying to give things too much of a title, in the lightweight area, and obviously looking very positive for Gossamer Gear into the future. Yeah,
we're looking forward to a very good year in 2013, and I still hope to make it over to your lovely isle there. I know Henry and Ron have been over, and actually Grant Seibel is coming over this year for the TGO Challenge, so it's still on my list.
Well, your name is over the bar, and there's a pint glass waiting for you.
Excellent.
Lovely. Well, thanks very much indeed, Glenn. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Take care.
I hope you've enjoyed this interesting series of conversations, and I'd like to thank once again Ron, Henry and Glenn for being so honest and forthright in their answers. All of them appear to have a direct and very personal relationship with their customers. All of them value and appreciate product feedback, and this has been an important part of design and commercial development for them over the last 10 years. I've received numerous emails from listeners, the majority of which feel it is time to move on from segregating the lightweight interests into categories of lightweight, ultralight, and even super ultralight. And I have to say, I agree with them. As Glenn so eloquently pointed out, surely the overall purpose is to get out more and enjoy all the benefits, and not spend all of your time poring over spreadsheets. If you've listened to the series, you'll know that one consistent comment from the wall was about the value of education, knowledge, and experience. If you look at the advertising and marketing of mainstream manufacturers, it always involves extremes. The highest peak, the fastest climb, the Arctic explorers, etc., etc. Extreme images of achievement with very little educational benefit to pass on to you, the purchaser, who might want to look like their hero but have little or no chance of emulating them. Brands which promote action heroes are actually quite faceless. You don't know the story behind the product, the designer, the gear tester, and how it evolved. Whereas in the lightweight arena, there's every chance you can speak on first-name terms at your own level with everyone you've purchased your equipment from. You'll also know they designed it and why. It's not beyond expectation to also visualise they packed the parcel it was shipped in too. Their marketing will of course be more humble than mainstream. However, there's every chance each image or story will be someone like yourself doing something you yourself could or would like to do. Whether it's an odd overnight wild camp or something like the Appalachian Trail. I doubt mainstream manufacturers will take on this niche arena in any major way, as they're commercially driven to produce and sell volume. Whereas the lightweight cottage manufacturers are more interested in well-thought-out design to meet their needs and the needs and demands of their end user. And they know what this is because, unlike the mainstream, they actually communicate with them, both online and in person while out on the trail. So to conclude, I think everyone agrees there is a solid future for cottage manufacturers and their products. The volume may not be high, but the future audience will always be looking for ways to extend their outdoor enjoyment with a lighter load. I hope you've enjoyed this series, and if you have any comments to add, please do so at the website, theoutdoorstation.co.uk. So until next time, folks, let's lighten the load, lift our chins up, and enjoy the view. Take care out there. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear more from our extensive free library, please visit the website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk. the home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for outdoors people everywhere.